have been discussing about Plato's Republic, and we continue to discuss about the form of dialogue which has been the methodological acumen in Plato's Republic. This paper is entitled as Early Greek Philosophy, is being introduced to the semester 2 students of UGC NET syllabus for the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi. And this is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, the Republic is Plato's best known philosophical work, which had been written sometime in 375 BCE. It has been a long Socratic dialogue in which Plato's mouthpiece, Socrates, discusses the meaning of justice, whether the just life is happier than the unjust life, and what the best possible city or state and soul would look like. The book mixes ethical, metaphysical, epistemological, and political reflections in a single dramatic inquiry. Plato writes the Republic as a dialogue rather than a straight essay because the investigation proceeds by conversation, which is to do with questions, objections, refinements, and thought experiments. The dialogue form allows Plato to stage arguments and counter-arguments, which is called as Socratic method and dialectic, dramatize different personalities and positions from Glaucon to Adimantus, Thrasymachus, and so on, to present imaginative devices like the ideal city, the allegory of the cave, and then test them by further questioning. The conversational or the dramatic mode is central to how Plato tries to persuade. It shows thought as a process, not just a set of finished propositions. Now, the core idea of Plato's Republic is justice as harmony in city and soul. Plato builds a model of city-soul analogy where justice in the city is mirrored by a well-ordered soul where reason rules. The spirit or the will supports it and appetite is disciplined. The tripartite society or the classes, which is an ideal city, has rulers, philosophers, guardians, auxiliaries, soldiers, and producers, farmers, artisans. Each class performs its function. Now, Philosopher King, only those who know the forms, especially the form of the good, they are fit to rule. Hence, Plato's famous notion that rulers should be philosophers. The theory of forms and epistemology, Plato distinguishes opinion from knowledge and uses images like the divided line and the allegory of the cave to show how education moves the soul from shadows to truth. Now, regarding education, censorship, and the noble lie, the Republic treats education as central to shaping citizens and controversially defends myth-making and strict cultural controls for civic harmony. Philosophers prize the Republic because it addresses the foundations: what is justice, what is knowledge, what makes a life good. The dialogue advances ethical theory, which is virtue and eudaimonia, metaphysics, which is to do with forms, and epistemology, how education yields knowledge. It is also a methodological model, which is dialectic, as the path to clarity. For analytic and continental traditions alike, many later arguments are responses to Plato's moves. Now, literary scholars read the Republic as great literature. Its dramatic structure, characters, myths, allegory of the cave, the divided line, the Allegory of the Sun, and rhetorical devices and sustained imaginative experiment make it rich for textual and rhetorical analysis. Plato's use of myth and metaphor and the tension between poetic form and philosophical content also made the Republic a central test case in debates about poetry, mimesis, and censorship. Now, political scientists treat the Republic as a foundational theory of government and normative political thought. It presents a model of social organization tied to education and virtue, raises enduring questions about expertise versus popular rule, philosopher rule versus democracy, and supplies vocabulary such as Philosopher King, class structure, the critique of regime types, still used in modern theory. At the same time, modern readers debate whether Plato's ideal tips into authoritarianism and how literally one should take the city-state. Now, use of Republic in practice by various disciplines, we see ethicists extract Plato's account of the good life and examine whether justice truly makes a person happier. Epistemologists study the divided line and the cave to discuss knowledge versus belief and the role of education. Aestheticians or the literary critics analyze Book 10, which is Plato's critique of poets and the myths, for what they reveal about truth, imitation, and moral education. Political theorists read the city-states as either a constructive utopian blueprint about governance and civic education or a provocative thought experiment to show consequences of valuing harmony over pluralism. Scholars argue both sides. Scholars still disagree about whether Plato literally intends the city-state as a political program or uses it as a didactic device to illuminate the soul and the good life. That productive ambiguity is part of why the Republic keeps being reread across disciplines. It raises big, interconnected questions and refuses easy answers. Now, in Book 1, we see the attempt has been made to defining justice, where the setting has all about being Socrates visiting the house of Cephalus in Piraeus, and the first definitions of justice has been when Cephalus states justice is telling the truth and repaying debts. Polemarchus states justice is helping friends and harming enemies. Thrasymachus further adds justice is the advantage of the stronger. Now, the Socratic response is repaying debts could lead to injustice, example, returning a weapon to a madman. Helping friends or harming enemies fails since humans misjudge who is truly a friend or enemy. Against Thrasymachus, rulers can err and injustice breeds division and weakness. So, the Book 1, which is defining justice, the importance that we see is Book 1 sets the tone, the open-ended pattern typical of Socratic dialogues, posing problems without closure, prompting deeper inquiry. Now, in Book 2, again, as a footnote, books are the chapters which are so addressed in Plato's dialogue. So, when we are talking about Book 1 or Book 9 or Book 2, we refer to either Chapter 1 or Chapter 9 or Chapter 2. Now, to get back to our discussion, in Book 2, the challenge of Glaucon and Adeimantus is pointed. Glaucon's challenge has been that it distinguishes goods into three classes: desired for their own sake, desired for their consequences, desired both for their own sake and their consequences. And he argues that most see justice only as number 2, which is desired for their consequences, which is a burdensome necessity. And in this comes the jigs myth, where anyone with power to act invisibly would commit injustice. Thus, people are just only for the form of fear of punishment. In Book 2, again we see Adeimantus's critique about religion, poetry and custom, and praises the appearance of justice, not justice itself. Socrates' task is to show that justice belongs to class, which again is good both in itself and for the consequences. He begins by constructing an ideal city to search for justice writ large. Further, about education of guardians, we see that it is the foundational in Book 3 about education. It is the foundational to forming just citizens. Poetry and music, for Socrates, Plato, it must be censored to prevent immoral tales of gods and heroes. Plato promotes only those stories that instill courage, moderation and truth. Gymnastics, physical discipline for health and spirit. Guardians training, they must be gentle to their own people but fierce against enemies. Also, the myth of the metals, where all citizens are born from the earth but possesses different metals in their souls. Gold by rulers, silver by auxiliaries, bronze or iron by producers. This legitimizes hierarchy as natural, not imposed. So, this raises questions on myth-making, political deception and civic unity. In Book 4, the city-soul analogy and definition of justice is seen, where 4 virtues of the city are mentioned: wisdom in rulers, courage in auxiliaries, temperance or agreement amongst all classes about who should rule, or the moderation, and justice, each class performing its proper function without interfering with others. Now, reason, as we see, this again comes very close to the 3 parts of the soul, mirroring the 3 parts of the city. Reason for the ruler, spirit for the auxiliary allied with reason, and appetite, desires, producers. So, justice in the soul is harmony when reason rules, spirit supports, and appetite obeys. Thus, Plato establishes a psychological as well as a political definition of justice. Then in Book 5, we see the radical proposals and the Philosopher King idea, where Plato talks about abolition of private family among guardians. He says that women and children to be shared communally, meant to remove conflicts of interest. Equality of women, where women can be guardians if they possess the same qualities, remarkable in the context of 4th century BCE Athens. Philosopher Kings, only philosophers who love truth and grasp the eternal forms are fit to rule. Philosophical import, the Republic shifts here from a moral, political to a metaphysical investigation. True politics must rest on knowledge of reality. Now in Book 6, the philosopher and the form of the good, the ship of the state analogy, where the philosopher, like a true navigator, is dismissed by sailors or politicians as useless, though only he knows how to guide. Nature of the philosopher, one who loves truth, not wealth or power, has knowledge of eternal realities. The sun analogy, just as the sun illuminates visible objects, the form of the good illuminates knowledge and makes reality intelligible. Significance, the good becomes the central metaphysical principle, source of truth, being and value. Without it, no just governance is possible. Now in book 7, there is also the discussion of the allegory of the cave and education of rulers. In the allegory of the cave, prisoners are chained, watching shadows, which is the ordinary human perception bound to illusion. The escape is to see objects than the sun, the journey from opinion, doxa, to knowledge, episteme, culminating in vision of the good, and to return to the cave where philosophers' duty to educate true society resists. Now book 7, the allegory of the cave and education of rulers, about the curriculum of the rulers, mathematics, which is to do with arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, harmonics, dialectic, and a long period of moral political training. Education is not inserting knowledge but turning the soul around, and true rulers must undergo this transformative ascent. So we see that books 1 to 2, the problem of justice is posed. Books 3 to 4, justice defined in terms of harmony in city and soul. Book 5 to 7, political order requires philosophers who grasp reality beyond appearances. Book 7, the cave, dramatizes the transformative journey from illusion to truth, making philosophy the basis of political authority. So some of the scholarly significance as takeaways from the Republic is, when it comes to philosophy, it is clearly a unified account of ethics, psychology, metaphysics, and epistemology. Literature, it is a dramatic dialogue rich in myth, allegory, and rhetorical artistry. Political science, it's a seminal text on governance, civic education, and the relationship between knowledge and power. And during debate, it is the city-state, a serious blueprint or a metaphor to illuminate the soul. Scholars still contest this. Now, about book 8, we see that there has been the decline of the regimes, where the theme of book 8 is largely when Plato turns from the ideal city to the degeneration of cities and souls. The regime types in descending order that Plato discusses is aristocracy, which is the rule of the best, that is the city-state governed by Philosopher King. Timocracy, rule of the honor-loving, like the military caste. Oligarchy, which is the rule of the wealthy, the sharp class divisions. Democracy, rule by the many, excessive freedom, instability. Tyranny, a rule of one dominated by lawless desire, the worst regime. So, the soul for Plato, he says, parallels to each of this regime. Now, the aristocratic soul is ruled by reason. The democratic soul is ruled by spirit or honor. The oligarchic soul is ruled by necessary appetites. The democratic soul is ruled by unnecessary desires. The tyrannical soul is enslaved by a single lawless passion. So, the political degeneration mirrors the inner moral or psychological degeneration. So, whatever is degenerating outside, it is only what has been or what has been going on degenerating inside. Now, in book 9 about the tyrannical man, Socrates details out about the character of the particular tyrant. He says that this tyrant is possessed by lawless desire which is to do with lust, greed, cruelty, lives in fear and enslaved to passion, paranoid of others. The tyrant appears powerful but is most miserable, lacking true freedom. So about the justice versus the injustice debate here, Socrates says that just life is superior because it harmonizes the soul. The three pleasures of learning, honor, and bodily appetite, the philosophical pleasure is highest since it relates to truth and the good. Justice is not only socially beneficial but also intrinsically tied to happiness. Now, in Book 10, which is the critique of poetry and the myth of the mimesis, we see that poets imitate appearances, not reality. That is, they are twice removed from the forms. Tragic poetry appeals to emotions, undermining reason and moral strength. Hence, poetry is banished from the ideal city, though Plato allows hymns to gods and praises of virtue. So basically, the reason why Plato was anti the poetic world or the artistic world was because for him the theory of form is the absolute real world. We are already 2 degrees away from reality because we all are in a pale imitation of the perfect world that lies outside or beyond this world. Now, what do the artists do or the poets do? Through their poetry, they take us to a 3rd degree away from reality. That is, we were already away from reality. The artists, the poets, further takes us to a world which is beyond the real world. And so, Plato was extremely clear that poets only imitate appearances, only appeal to emotions, and as such they undermine reason and moral strength, and so they ought to be bracketed. So for Plato, the soul cannot be destroyed by evil. Injustice harms but does not annihilate it. Now further we also see about the myth of the Ur. Now what is this? Ur, a soldier, returns from death and recounts the afterlife. Souls are judged and rewarded or punished for 1,000 years. Souls then choose new lives before reincarnation. Choice reveals character. The wise who have seen the forms choose balanced lives. The ignorant, dazzled by appearance, choose unwisely. So philosophy prepares the soul to choose rightly and live justly. Justice has eternal significance, not just earthly benefits. So, in Book 8, when we see the synthesis between Books 8 to 10, we see that political and psychological degeneration from rational harmony to tyranny possession is there. Book 9 is about the tyrant, far from powerful is most wretched. Justice is intrinsically linked with happiness. And Book 10, it is all about art and poetry that must be subordinated to philosophy, the immortal soul's destiny which is tied to justice, and the myth of Ur, where it provides a cosmic and clear justification for philosophy. Similarly, in books 1 to 2, we saw the problem of justice which was posed. What is justice? Why should one be just? Books 3 to 4 was about justice being defined in city and soul as harmony. In books 5 to 7, it was about Philosopher Kings, forms and the education of rulers, the Allegory of the Cave. Books 8 to 9, it was about the decline of regimes and souls, justice versus tyranny. And Book 10, it is all about critique of poetry, immortality of the soul, cosmic reward of justice, or the myth of error. Thus, here we see that in philosophy, this book provides foundational arguments in ethics, political theory, metaphysics, psychology, aesthetics, and more. In literature, it combines dramatic dialogues with myth, allegory, and philosophical argumentation. In political science, it explores the life cycle of regimes, dangers of democracy, and the nature of tyranny, still resonant in modern debates. In religious or such allied studies, we see that the myth of error introduces themes of judgment, reincarnation, and cosmic justice, showing Plato's concern with the fate of the soul beyond politics. Now, quickly to revisit what we have studied or discussed so far, Plato's holds that beyond the world of sensible particulars, which is changing, imperfect things, lies a realm of forms. Forms are eternal, unchanging, perfect realities. Particulars are mere shadows or participations of forms. Thus, knowledge or episteme requires stable universal objects, but the sensible world is always changing. Hence, true knowledge is of the forms, not the fleeting things of sense. About the methodology, we had talked about dialectic, which is Socratic's questioning. Through dialogue, Socrates leads others to refine definitions, exposes contradictions, and ascend towards higher truths. About analogy and myth, Plato often conveys philosophy through images, the sun, lion, cave, and so on, that stimulate philosophical vision beyond dry reasoning. And about division and collection, he distinguishes types of knowledge, opinion, and organizes them hierarchically. The method just is not logic but an educational ascent, philosophy as turning the soul. And there have been many analogies too, the simile of the sun in books 6 to 8, which one can go through if one is interested. The main focus is that the good is the highest form, source of all reality and knowledge. Without it, nothing, absolutely nothing is knowable or meaningful. Thank you so much.